The desert had swallowed the radio silence whole. Somewhere in the coast province, 8 Navy SEALs pressed their backs against crumbling mud walls, ammunition counts dropping like prayers whispered into static. The Taliban had them. 300 meters of open ground separated them from extraction, and the enemy knew it. Every shadow held an AK-47. Every rooftop concealed a sniper's nest. The team leader, call sign Grizzly One, had stopped checking his watch. Time meant nothing when you were counting rounds instead of minutes. His radio crackled once, twice, then died into that terrible quiet that comes before men make their final stands. They'd called for air support 40 minutes ago. Central Command had acknowledged, but the closest air asset was a two-ship of F-15Es returning from a strike package over Kandahar, and they were Winchester, out of precision munitions, flying on fumes and the promise of a hot meal back at Bagram. Except one of them wasn't returning. The Wingman had peeled off somewhere over the Spingar Mountains, and now only a single Strike Eagle remained in the sky, Coulson Widow 7. The JTAC, Joint Terminal Attack Controller, embedded with the SEAL team had his laser designator trained on nothing because you can't designate targets for a pilot who has nothing left to drop. The Taliban knew this too. They were taking their time now, tightening the noose, savoring it. Grizzly One could hear them calling to each other in Pashto, coordinating. He'd been in Afghanistan long enough to recognize the tone of men who think they've already won. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of the silence that would come after, when the names of his team would be read aloud in ceremonies back home, folded flags handed to families who would never fully understand how the sun looked that day, how the dust tasted, how their boys had fought. Then the radio broke its silence, not with command. Not with another two-ship scrambling from base. Just a woman's voice, calm as Sunday morning, with an accent that carried the red clay of Oklahoma or maybe Arkansas. Grizzly One, Widow 7, I'm 3 minutes out. Talk to me. The JTAC blinked. His hand hovered over the transmit button. A single jet, no wingman, no ordnance. He keyed up anyway because hope sounds different than resignation, and he wasn't ready to give up that difference yet. Widow 7, we are danger close on all sides. No LZ. Winchester on CAS options. Can you? I know what I can do, she cut him off. Mark your position. Stay low. The F-15E Strike Eagle crossed into hostile airspace alone, contrails carving white scars against the ceramic blue of Afghan sky. Inside the cockpit, Major Anise Harrow adjusted her oxygen mask and ran through options that didn't exist. Her weapons systems officer, Captain Miles Tiong, had gone quiet in the back seat, not because he doubted her, but because he'd flown 37 missions with her and knew when she was doing the math that couldn't be done on paper. They were empty. 2 AIM-9 Sidewinders hung from the rails, useless against ground targets. The 20 rotary cannon still had rounds, but strafing runs in a $65 million jet over fortified enemy positions without a wingman was the kind of decision that ended careers. Or lives. Usually both. Inez didn't care about the career anymore. She'd watched too many promotions pass to men who flew fewer missions, logged fewer hours, kissed the right rings. 15 years in the Air Force had taught her that competence was often punished with more work and less recognition. They called her widow because she'd lost 2 wingmen, not to enemy fire, but to reassignments to politics, to men who couldn't handle taking orders from a woman with twice their stick time. So now she flew alone more often than not. Preferred it that way. The irony wasn't lost on her. Below, the terrain shifted from mountain to valley, patchwork fields surrendering to compounds and kill zones. Miles called out coordinates. Target area 2 minutes. Grizzly One is marked with IR strobe, but they're surrounded. I'm counting at least 40 hostiles closing from 3 directions. 40, Inez repeated, voice flat. She toggled her targeting pod, painting the ground with infrared eyes. The SEAL team appeared as bright white signatures clustered behind a low wall. The enemy scattered like ants around them, methodical, patient. No panic. These weren't amateurs. Widow 7, Grizzly One. The JTAC's voice carried the weight of last chances. We need gun runs, danger close, 20 meters from our position. Miles whistled low. 20 meters, that's knife-fighting range. I've threaded worse needles, Inez said. It wasn't bravado, just fact. She'd grown up in the Ozarks, learned to fly crop dusters over her family's failing farm before she could drive. Her father used to say she could thread a Cessna through a wedding ring if you gave her reason to. The Air Force had given her better planes and worse reasons, but the principle held. She banked hard, dropping altitude, feeling the eagle respond like an extension of her own nerve endings. The Taliban saw her coming. Of course they did. An F-15E doesn't sneak. It announces, it dominates. Muzzle flashes erupted from rooftops as they opened fire, tracers arcing upward like angry fireflies. Inez ignored them. Small arms fire couldn't touch her at this altitude, and they had no MANPADs in the area according to the briefing. Briefings were sometimes wrong, but today wasn't the day to second-guess intelligence. She lined up her first run, pushing the eagle's nose down into a descent angle that made Miles grip his restraints. The GE engine screamed. The airframe shuddered with the barely controlled violence of a fighter jet doing things it was designed for but never comfortable with. Grizzly 1, 30 seconds. Heads down. The SEAL team flattened. Inez could see them through her pod, tiny figures pressed into earth that had soaked up centuries of blood. The Taliban positions lit up her HUD, clusters of heat signatures, weapons raised, some already running. Not fast enough. She squeezed the trigger. The M61 Vulcan cannon roared to life, 6 barrels spinning at 6,000 rounds per minute, spitting 20 shells that tore through mud walls like tissue paper. The first burst walked across the northern rooftop, 3 seconds of fire that turned cover into craters. Bodies tumbled. Dust exploded. Inez pulled up hard, grunting against the G-forces, feeling her flight suit compress around her legs as the anti-G straining maneuver kicked in. Miles called out, "Good hits, good hits." Grizzly confirms 8 hostiles down, but they're still surrounded. "I see them." Inez rolled inverted for a split second, old habit, better visibility, then righted and came around for another pass. This one would be tighter. The Taliban had repositioned, clustering closer to the SEAL team, using proximity as a shield. Betting she wouldn't risk it. They didn't know about the crop dusters. Didn't know about the summer her brother had fallen off the tractor and she'd flown him to the hospital herself, hedge-hopping power lines and barn roofs because every second mattered. Didn't know that precision wasn't just a skill for Inez Harrow. It was a reflex older than her commission. The second gun run came from the east, sun at her back, altitude so low she could see individual faces turning upward in surprise. The cannon spoke again, shorter bursts this time, more surgical. Rounds impacted 15 meters from the SEAL position, close enough that Grizzly 1 could probably feel the shockwave, far enough that only enemy blood sprayed. Miles was reading off damage assessments, coordinates, ammunition counts, but Inez had already moved past thinking. This was the place where training and instinct merged, where the jet became part of her body and the sky just another room in a house she'd lived in all her life. She pulled up, rolled, came around again. Third pass, fourth. Each one a calculated risk, each one burning through cannon rounds she'd need if things went worse. But things were already worse. The Taliban weren't retreating, they were adapting. Someone down there had a brain. They'd split into smaller groups, harder to target without risking the friendlies. And they'd started firing not at her jet but at the SEAL position itself, trying to pin them down while she circled. Widow 7, Grizzly 1. The JTAC's voice had shifted from hope to something harder. "We're taking effective fire from a technical Western approach. DSHK heavy machine gun, maybe 200 meters out. We can't move and I can't mark it without exposing position." A technical. Toyota with a Soviet-era 12.7 machine gun bolted to the bed. Mobile deadly, perfect for shredding anyone who tried to cross that open ground to extraction. Inez checked her remaining cannon rounds. 68. Enough for maybe 2 more good runs. Maybe. "I'll find it," she said. Miles was already scanning with the targeting pod, infrared and optical feeds merging into a coherent picture of hell. Then he had it, thermal bloom of an engine, heat signature of a weapon being fired, dust cloud from the movement. Western Ridge, 275 degrees from Grizzly position. Moving southeast, speed about 30 clicks. "Marked," Inez confirmed. She banked hard, trading altitude for speed, letting the Eagle drop like a falcon onto prey that didn't know it had been seen. Technical's driver must have sensed it, that animal instinct that comes before sound, before sight. He swerved hard left, but physics had other plans. Inez fired, walked the cannon rounds across the vehicle's path like a promise being kept. The Technical exploded not dramatically like in movies, but efficiently, metal and meat rendered into component parts by high-explosive incendiary rounds. The machine gun went silent. Miles exhaled. Good kill. Grizzly 1 confirms Technical destroyed. How many hostiles remaining? Inez asked, already pulling up, already scanning for the next threat. JTAC counts approximately 20 scattered. They're breaking contact. Breaking contact. Military speak for retreat. The Taliban weren't stupid. They'd lost 24 fighters and gained nothing but stories about the jet that wouldn't quit. Inez made 2 more passes anyway, lower than before, a message written in jet wash and cannon fire. I'm still here. Try again and see what happens. She didn't fire, didn't need to. Sometimes the threat of violence was enough, especially when delivered by a woman who'd already proven she'd follow through. Grizzly 1 called up, voice rough with relief and dust. Widow 7, you're cleared off. Hello's inbound for extract. I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by getting home, Inez said. Widow 7 off station. She climbed back toward operational altitude, the Eagle's engines settling into that steady roar that meant no longer at war, just traveling through sky that didn't care about the difference. Miles spoke quietly from the back seat. That was some of the finest flying I've ever seen. Just doing the job, Inez replied, but her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fatting. Not from fear, from the relief of having enough, of being enough, of proving once again that skill mattered more than gender when the bullets were real and the choices were binary. Central Command came over the radio with routing back to Bagram. She acknowledged, turned northwest, watched the Hindu Kush mountains rise ahead like ancient sentinels. Bagram Airfield at dusk looked like every other forward operating base Inez had seen. Concertina wire, blast walls, and exhaustion rendered in concrete and canvas. She brought the Eagle down with the kind of landing that didn't attract attention, firm but unremarkable, exactly the way she'd been taught. The tower cleared her to taxi. She followed the marshallers' wands to the revetment, shut down the engines, and sat in the sudden silence that always followed flight. Her ears rang. Her back ached. Her flight suit was soaked through with sweat. Miles climbed down first, helped her with the ladder, said nothing because nothing needed saying. The crew chief approached, running his eyes over the jet with the critical gaze of a man whose life depended on its airworthiness. How'd she handle? Like she always does, Inez said. A few bullet strikes, nothing serious. Cannon barrels are hot. I heard you went Winchester. Close enough. She pulled off her helmet, felt the evening air cool against her damp hair. Around them, the base continued its eternal rhythm. Helicopters lifting off for night missions, cargo planes bringing supplies, maintenance crews swarming over aircraft like industrious ants. No one stopped. No one stared. She'd saved 8 lives today, and tomorrow someone else would do the same, and that was simply how it worked in places where mission mattered more than medals. Except Colonel Vance was waiting by the operations building, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Inez felt her stomach drop. Vance never met aircraft personally unless something had gone significantly right or catastrophically wrong. Major Harrow, my office, now. Miles shot her a look. She shrugged, followed the colonel across the flight line, past rows of fighters and cargo birds into the blessed air conditioning of the headquarters building. Vance's office was Spartan desk, computer, photos of his family back in Virginia, American flag in the corner. He gestured to a chair. Inez remained standing. You went off mission parameters, Vance said. No preamble, no small talk. I responded to a troops in contact situation, Inez replied, keeping her voice neutral. Within my authority as on-station air support. You were Winchester, out of munitions, alone, and you conducted multiple danger-close gun runs without authorization from higher. Vance's voice was level, professional, which somehow made it worse than if he'd been shouting. Those SEALs had 45 seconds left before being overrun. I made the call. You made a call. Whether it was the right call is above my pay grade, Major. He pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. Inez didn't touch it. What's this? Could be a letter of reprimand. Could be a Silver Star recommendation. Depends on how the investigation goes. Investigation. The word tasted bitter. 8 men are alive right now because I stayed on station. That's not enough. Vance's expression softened just for a moment, just enough for her to see the tired officer beneath the rank insignia. Between you and me, it's more than enough. You did good work today, Inez. Exactly the kind of flying that reminds me why we do this job. He paused, choosing words carefully. But you're a female pilot who flew a solo close air support mission against standing protocols. There are people in the chain of command who will see that as recklessness, not courage. They'll ask why you didn't wait for backup. They'll question your judgment. They'll use words like cowboy and maverick and make them sound like insults. Because I'm a woman. Because you're a woman who makes them uncomfortable, who flies better than their golden boys, who doesn't apologize for being good at her job. Vance leaned back, rubbed his eyes. I'm on your side here, but I need you to understand, saving lives won't protect you from bureaucracy, and bureaucracy has a long memory. Inez picked up the folder, didn't open it. When does the investigation start? Already has. Inspector General will be here next week. Just tell the truth. The tape from your gun camera doesn't lie. The tape never does, Inez said. It's the people watching it who have trouble seeing straight. She left Vance's office as the sun surrendered to the Afghan night, turning the sky the color of old bruises. The base had shifted to nocturnal operations, floodlights harsh against darkness, generators humming their constant song. Inez walked to the female officers' quarters, a plywood building that housed the dozen or so women currently deployed to Bagram. Most were intelligence, logistics, medical. She was one of 2 combat pilots. The other was Major Lisa Cordova, a Black Hawk pilot who'd been in-country for 6 months and had the tired eyes to prove it. Lisa looked up from her bunk when Inez entered. Heard you had an interesting afternoon. Word travels fast. Always does when it's a woman doing the flying. You okay? Inez sat on her own bunk, still holding the folder. Vance says there's going to be an investigation. Says I went off protocol. Lisa snorted. You saved 8 SEALs with an empty gun and they're investigating you? Jesus. If you were a guy, they'd pin a medal on you and call it a day. If I were a guy, I'd probably have had a wingman. Wouldn't have been alone in the first place. The words came out more bitter than Inez intended, but Lisa just nodded. She understood. Every woman in a combat zone understood. You could be twice as good and still get half the credit. You could follow every rule and still be judged by different standards. You could save lives and still have men question whether you should have been there at all. What are you going to do? Lisa asked. Tell the truth. Fly my next mission. Keep doing the job until they tell me I can't. That's my girl. Lisa stood, stretched. Come on. The chow hall has actual chicken tonight. Not great chicken, but actual chicken. We should celebrate you not dying and not getting 8 people killed. Inspirational pep talk. I'm a helicopter pilot. We're all about realistic expectations. They walked together across the base, past soldiers who barely looked up, past aircraft being prepped for night missions, past the weight of everything unspoken. The Inspector General arrived on a Tuesday, which seemed fitting somehow, not important enough for a Monday, not casual enough for a Friday. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Michaels, JAG Corps, with a briefcase that probably cost more than Inez's monthly salary and an expression that suggested she'd already made up her mind. They met in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Michaels had the incident report, the gun camera footage, the radio transcripts. She had statements from Grizzly One, from Miles, from the tower controllers. She had everything except context, which was the thing that mattered most. Major Harrow, walk me through your decision-making process, Michaels said, pen poised over a legal pad. Inez had prepared for this. Rehearsed it with Lisa, who'd been through her own investigation after a hot LZ extraction that had saved 12 soldiers but violated 3 paragraphs of the rules of engagement. I was returning from a strike mission with my WSO, Winchester, on precision munitions. We monitored a troops in contact call from a SEAL team in Coast Province. The closest air support was 30 minutes out. I assessed that the ground force would be overrun before backup arrived, so I diverted to provide support using my remaining cannon rounds. You assessed, Michaels repeated. Yes, ma'am. Based on what intelligence? What authorization? Based on the JTAC's transmission and my 15 years of combat experience, authorization came from the fact that American soldiers were about to die. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Michaels wrote something down. You were alone. Your wingman had RTB'd due to a maintenance issue. Standard protocol requires minimum 2-ship for close air support missions. Standard protocol assumes you have time to follow standard protocol. That sounds like justification for recklessness. That sounds like reality, ma'am, with respect. Michaels looked up. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. Major, I've reviewed the footage. What you did was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. I'm here to determine which. Maybe it was both, Inez said, then immediately regretted it. You didn't get clever with Jag. Michaels might have smiled, hard to tell. Tell me about your call sign. Widow, that's unusual. Here it was. The thing Inez had known would come up but hoped wouldn't. Every call sign had a story, and hers was the kind that looked bad on paper if you didn't understand the full context. I've had 2 assigned wingmen over my last deployment cycle. Both requested transfers to different squadrons. The name stuck. Why did they request transfers? You'd have to ask them, ma'am. I did. Off the record, they suggested you were difficult to work with, uncompromising. One used the word aggressive. Aggressive. Inez let the word settle. What's the male equivalent of that? Assertive, confident, decisive. Michael's pen stopped moving. Major, I'm not your enemy here. Then why does this feel like a prosecution? Because I need to determine if you're a maverick who endangers her crew or a skilled pilot who makes hard calls under pressure. The difference matters. Not just for you, for every female pilot who comes after you. You know that. It was true, and Inez hated that it was true. She wasn't just defending herself. She was defending the legitimacy of every woman who'd ever worn wings. One mistake, one bad call, and it would become evidence that women couldn't handle combat. Never mind the dozens of male pilots who'd made worse decisions. Never mind the long history of men screwing up and still getting second chances. My wingman left because I hold people to the same standard I hold myself, Inez said carefully. Because I don't tolerate half measures when lives are at stake. If that makes me difficult, then yes, I'm difficult. But I've never lost a crew member, never failed a mission, never put personal comfort ahead of mission success. Can they say the same? Michael studied her for a long moment, then she closed her notepad. The footage shows you placed rounds within 20 meters of friendly forces, multiple times, at altitude and speed that left zero margin for error. One mistake and you kill 8 SEALs instead of saving them. I didn't make a mistake. No, you didn't. You threaded an impossible needle, Major. I've shown that footage to 3 fighter pilots I trust, and all 3 said they wouldn't have attempted what you did. Too risky. Too much could go wrong. But it didn't go wrong. This time. Michael stood, gathered her papers. Here's what's going to happen. I'm recommending no disciplinary action. The mission was within your operational authority and the outcome speaks for itself. But I'm also noting in my report that you took extraordinary risks that fell outside normal operational parameters. That's not a criticism, it's a statement of fact. The Air Force will make its own determination about commendations. Inez felt something unknot in her chest. Not relief exactly, more like the acknowledgement that she'd survived another test she shouldn't have had to take. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me, thank your gun camera, and maybe reconsider your approach to teamwork. Call sign or not, you shouldn't be flying alone as often as you do. Michaels paused at the door. Off the record, what you did was brave and necessary, but bravery without backup is just another word for suicide. Eventually, the odds catch up. Remember that. Then she was gone, and Inez was alone in the conference room with the stale coffee smell and the knowledge that she'd been judged and found. What? Acceptable, dangerous, useful, she didn't know, didn't care. She had 3 more months in country, and the Taliban didn't take breaks for investigations. She stood, stretched, and walked back out into the Afghan afternoon, where the work continued and the sky waited. The commendation never came. Not officially, anyway. What came instead was a reputation which in some ways mattered more. Grizzly One's team made it back to Bagram 2 days after the incident. They sought her out at the Chow Hall, 8 large men in beards and body armor, the kind who usually kept to themselves, operating in shadows and classified briefings. Their team leader, a guy who looked like he'd been carved from granite and bad decisions, walked straight up to Aniz's table and extended his hand. Major Harrow, Senior Chief Marcus Diaz, my boys and I wanted to say thank you in person. Iniz shook his hand, felt the calluses and scars that told their own story. Just doing my job, Senior Chief. Bullshit, respectfully, Diaz grinned. You came in Winchester alone and put rounds so close to our position I felt the heat. That's not just doing your job, that's giving a damn. There's a difference. The other SEALs nodded. One of them, baby-faced but with old eyes, spoke up. My daughter's 3rd birthday is next week. I'll be there because of you. That's not nothing. It was everything, actually, but Iniz just nodded because her throat had gone tight and she didn't trust herself to speak. These men understood something that the Inspector General never would, that the point wasn't the procedure, wasn't the protocol, wasn't the career implications. The point was getting people home. Diaz pulled something from his pocket, a small patch, dark green with gold embroidery. A trident. The SEAL insignia. This is for you. It's not official and we'll deny it if anyone asks, but you earned it. You bled with us that day, even if it was from 30,000 feet up. I can't accept this, Iniz said, even as her hands reached for it. Sure you can, you already did. Diaz's expression went serious. We take care of our own, Major. You're one of ours now. You ever need anything, you call. Understood? Understood. They left as quietly as they'd come, fading back into whatever shadows they operated from, but the patch remained. Iniz kept it in her flight suit pocket, a reminder that some recognitions came from peers who understood the cost, not from officers who counted paragraphs and policy violations. Lisa saw it later that night, raised an eyebrow. SEALs don't give those out lightly. I know. You're collecting quite a reputation, the pilot who flies alone and makes it work. I'd rather have a wingman I can trust. Careful what you wish for. But Lisa was smiling, that knowing smile of someone who'd walked similar roads. The missions continued. Iniz flew patrol routes, provided overwatch for convoys, conducted strikes against Taliban positions in the Korangal Valley. Each mission was textbook, professional, effective, unremarkable, exactly how she liked it, except she wasn't flying alone anymore. Captain Miles T. Young had requested permanent assignment as her WSO. Then Lieutenant Sasha Okoye, a newly minted pilot, had requested Iniz as her flight lead for training missions. Then 2 more pilots, both male, both with combat experience, had quietly asked to be assigned to her squadron. Vance called her in again, this time with bourbon, the good stuff he kept hidden in his desk for special occasions. You're becoming a problem, Harrow. Sir, people want to fly with you, which means people don't want to fly with other instructors. Which means I have a personnel management issue. He poured 2 fingers, slid it across. Also, you're the most requested close air support asset by ground commanders. They specifically ask for Widow 7. Do you know how rare that is? I wasn't aware. Like hell you weren't. You're building a legend whether you want to or not. The female pilot who flies alone and gets the job done. The one who came in empty and saved 8 SEALs. It's spreading. I've had inquiries from other squadrons about your tactics, your training, your approach. I just fly the jets, sir. You do more than that. You show people it's possible to do the impossible if you're good enough and committed enough. That's leadership, Major, whether you want the responsibility or not. Vance drank his bourbon, let the silence stretch. I'm putting you in for a training rotation when you rotate back stateside. Instructor pilot, advanced air combat tactics. You'll teach the next generation what it really takes. With respect, sir, I'd rather stay operational. I know. That's why you're the right person for the job. The ones who want to teach are usually the ones who shouldn't. He stood, held out his hand. That's an order, by the way, not a request. Iniz shook his hand, felt the weight of expectations settling across her shoulders like a yoke. Teaching meant visibility, meant scrutiny, meant every mistake magnified, every success attributed to luck rather than skill, every day proving again that she belonged in a profession that still questioned whether women should be there at all. But it also meant shaping the pilots who'd come after her, meant passing on the lessons learned in blood and adrenaline, meant maybe, just maybe, creating a culture where female pilots didn't have to be twice as good to be considered half as competent. "Yes, sir," she said. "I'll do it. I know you will." Dismissed, she walked out into the night where the stars burned cold and indifferent above the war. Somewhere out there, another mission was happening. Other pilots were threading their own needles. Other soldiers were counting on people they'd never meet to keep them alive. The work continued. The work always continued. But now Inez was part of something larger than herself, a tradition being built one mission at a time, one student at a time, one moment of excellence that couldn't be denied or diminished. She looked up at the stars, thought of her father back in the Ozarks, wondered if he was looking at the same sky, wondered if he was proud. The C-17 that carried her back to the States touched down at Dover Air Force Base on a morning that felt like a memory, cold and gray, and full of the kind of light that doesn't quite commit to being day. Inez walked down the ramp with 100 other soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, all returning from their own wars, carrying their own stories. The crowd of families waited behind barriers, holding signs and flags, and children who didn't quite remember their parents. Inez had no one waiting. Her father had passed 2 years ago, and her mother lived in a memory care facility now, her mind lost to Alzheimer's. No siblings, no husband, just the job and the sky and the quiet understanding that some people were meant to walk alone. She collected her gear, processed through the return ceremony, endured the brief speeches about service and sacrifice. Then she was on a military shuttle to Joint Base Langley Eustis, where her next assignment waited. The first fighter wing, home of the F-22 Raptor program, but Inez wouldn't be flying, she'd be teaching. The fighter weapons school, where the best came to get better, where every student would know her record, her reputation, and her gender, and would judge her accordingly. The shuttle dropped her at base housing, a small unit that smelled like industrial cleaner and loneliness. She unpacked methodically, hanging her uniform with creases sharp enough to cut, polishing her boots until they reflected the overhead light. The seal trident patch went into a drawer, too personal for public display. The folder from Colonel Vance, still unopened, went into another drawer. Some things you carried but didn't examine. She reported for duty the next morning at 0600, walking into a building that hummed with the particular energy of people who took flying seriously. The walls were covered with photos of past instructors, past students, past victories. She counted 3 women among hundreds of men. Progress maybe, but slow as erosion. The chief instructor, Colonel Bradley Hammer Zhao, was waiting in his office. He was older than Vance, with gray at his temples and the kind of bearing that suggested he'd seen everything twice. "Major Harrow, I've read your file, impressive record," Hammer gestured to a chair. "I've also read the incident report from Coast, the IG investigation, the unofficial recommendations from SEAL Team 7. You're either very good or very lucky." "Little of both, sir," Inez said. "Most honest answer I've heard all week." Hammer smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Let me be direct. You're here because you're an excellent pilot. But you're also here because the Air Force wants to show it values diversity. Public relations, optics, whatever you want to call it. Some of the instructors resent that. They'll test you, push you, wait for you to fail so they can say women don't belong in advanced tactical training. With respect, sir, I've been dealing with that my entire career. I'm sure you have, but this is different. Here, you're not just representing yourself, you're representing the future. Every female pilot who wants to fly fighters will be judged by how well you do. Fair, no, but that's the reality." Inez had heard variations of this speech a dozen times. The weight of representation, the burden of being first, the responsibility to every woman who'd come after, it never got lighter. "What do you need from me, sir? Teach these kids to fly like you do, with precision, with courage, with the understanding that the mission matters more than ego. And try not to let the bastards wear you down." He slid a folder across his desk. "Your first class starts next week. 12 students, all combat experienced, all certain they know everything. Show them they don't." Inez took the folder, already knowing what it would contain: names, records, psychological profiles, flight histories. She'd read them tonight, memorize them by morning, understand her students before they understood themselves. That was the job. One more thing, Hammer said as she stood to leave. That call sign, widow, it's going to be a problem here. Sir, the students will hear it and make assumptions, that you're cold, ruthless, that you got the name by getting people killed. You and I know that's not true, but perception matters. You might want to consider requesting a change. With respect, sir, I earned that call sign. The story behind it is mine. I'm not changing it to make others comfortable. Hammer studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough. Just be prepared for the questions and the judgment. The questions came immediately. Her first class assembled in a briefing room that smelled like jet fuel and ambition. 12 pilots, 11 men and 1 woman, all wearing flight suits with patches that told stories of combat and near misses and missions that had tested them. They looked at Inez with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism to outright hostility. She stood at the front of the room, clicked through to the first slide of her presentation, and met their eyes one by one. Good morning. I'm Major Inez Harrow, call sign Widow. I'll be your primary instructor for advanced close air support tactics. Over the next 8 weeks, I'm going to teach you how to provide effective fire support in complex environments, how to make split-second decisions under pressure, and how to